On today's show, Tari Eason and the Houston Rockets do not come to terms on a rookie scale contract extension. What that means for this season and going forward for both sides, coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Fridays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. A bonus edition episode, slightly different format, bit more quick hitting. We'll be in and out, short and sweet, because we're going to talk about the Tari Eason stuff here. The really unfortunate breaking news from ESPN's Shams Charania: no rookie extension for the Houston Rockets and Tari Eason. Sources tell ESPN sides could not bridge gaps on multiple fronts by Monday's deadline. Eason will become a restricted free agent next offseason. Okay, so we're gonna have two parts in this episode, one break in the middle, and I'll save some of the down the line, talk about free agency and the future stuff. I want to focus on what this means for this season right now. And on the surface, it sucks. This is disappointing. There's no way to slice it any differently. It's disappointing that the Rockets and Tari were not able to come to terms on a rookie scale extension, because this was supposed to be the final domino, the final piece of the Rockets puzzle for all the fantastic moves, all the roster churning and construction, and putting in all the different right pieces this offseason to really flesh out what feels like a true blue contender. And Tari was the final piece to try and wedge in there and get situated so that this team, this 10-man core and this coaching staff and Rafael Stone in the front office would be here locked in for the next handful of years, two, three seasons, whatever. And now there's uncertainty. Now we don't know what the future is going to hold for Tari Eason and the Houston Rockets. The benefit here, it's not the end of the world. I want to pump the brakes here. It's disappointing that a deal was not struck, but it's not the end of the world. Because as a quick reminder, what restricted free agency means is that Tari Eason walks into, he's betting on himself. Whatever the offer was that the Rockets had on the table, he feels like he's worth more than that, or he wanted more than that at the end of the day. And the Rockets weren't willing to meet him on whatever that price point was. Now, we have no idea. We're not going to know what happened in these closed door discussions. It is what it is. Maybe Tari felt that he was worth, closer to that max amount of money that the Rockets could have offered him, which would have been something along the lines of 5 years, $125 million or whatever, which is the most they could have offered him without jeopardizing themselves as far as the second apron is concerned and all that stuff down the line, the tax ramifications of everything, of all the financials. And the Rockets were probably somewhere significantly lower than that, right? They were trying to, because whatever money the Rockets were able to save between what they did offer Tari Eason on his average annual value would have been money they could have then allocated next summer potentially to a free agent using the taxpayer mid-level exception. And that would have given them the opportunity to flesh out the roster even further, to add an 11th or a 12th man to the team as another really important depth piece for this championship roster moving forward without dipping into the second apron, which is, that's kind of a masterclass in how the Rockets have, set up their finances and adjusted payroll and all this stuff. And a big part of that has to do with Kevin Durant taking a pretty major sacrifice financially. He's the team's best player and he's only making $45 million. There are other teams that have their best player, their top 10, top 15 guy, they're making $60+ million, right? And that hamstrings you quite a bit more as far as what you can do financially on the roster. So for this season, really disappointing that the Rockets and Tari couldn't come to terms. And ultimately, Tari is well within his right to bet on himself, to want to test the market next summer and see what's out there. And who knows, maybe it was money centric and he wanted the Rockets to pay him more. Maybe it was more about the role, right? We've heard Tari talk a lot about wanting a bigger role, wanting more opportunity. And maybe he just sees the writing on the wall that there's not really going to be a starting spot available in Houston for him anytime soon. And if Tari wants to and believes in his heart of hearts that he is good enough to go be a starter on another team, potentially another contending team at that, then he has every right to want to bet on himself and go out and test the waters and try and do that. It's just unfortunate because he is such an integral part of the Rockets, their culture, their identity, everything they've established these past couple of years. I know he's been injured and he hasn't been here for all of it, but when Tari has been available, his contributions are just, they jump off the page, right? He's so good and so impactful in the minutes that he plays that it's very disappointing that the Rockets weren't able to lock him down long term. And now, unfortunately, everything that Tari does this season is going to be under a bit of a microscope, because now there's going to be this little bit of a lingering cloud following Tari and following the Rockets this season, this little narrative, this little storyline of, man, he couldn't come to terms on a deal. Was he being selfish? Was he, Kevin Durant sacrificed a ton of money for the betterment of the team. Could Tari not sacrifice and take a slightly more team-friendly contract? And again, if the Rockets were offering something like disrespectfully low, like 4 years, $60 million, like $15 million per, I completely understand Tari's reasoning to want to test the waters elsewhere. But if they were offering something in line with more or less what his value or perceived value is, if they were giving him, 18 a year, 19 a year, or that upper end, 20 a year or something along those lines, and Tari was still like, no, I'm worth 25 a year. Like, give me 4 years, 100 million, or I don't want it. Right. Then that's a little bit more like, come on, we're talking the difference of, obviously it's a pretty sizable chunk of change there. That's the difference between, I guess $20 million between 4 for 80 and 4 for 100. And that's a lot of money to give up on your first NBA contract. So, Tari's going to have to bet on himself and see, if there's another team out there next summer that's going to be willing to offer him that amount of money. But now everything that happens this season, I hope that it doesn't impact Tari's ability to play for the team, right? Because now this is a contract year for Tari. Every time that he's out there on the floor, it's an opportunity for him to showcase his skills to try and garner a big payday down the line. And so if you ever see, Tari Eason, if he looks off Kevin Durant or Sengun or Amin Thompson and opts to do his own thing on the floor, people might look at that a certain way and be like, man, he's playing selfish basketball, right? He's out for himself. He's out for his own contract. He's not worried about the team's success. And that's a very frustrating, concerning lens to have to potentially view things through. I don't think that for a second. I don't think that Tari's that kind of guy to just from every interaction that I've ever had with him. I don't think that he'd be the selfish kind of guy to sabotage the team in any capacity, out to secure his own bag or anything like that. But it's something that's going to follow, and it's going to be something that people are going to talk about with this team throughout the season. And it's just really unfortunate, again, at the end of the day, because it would have been so nice to be able to sew things up nice and neat and have everything locked in for the foreseeable future. And instead, now there's a lot of, gray area here, and there's different ways that this could happen. Ultimately, because Tari is a restricted free agent, the Rockets will have first right of refusal to re-sign him next summer. So if a team does walk along and offers him $20 million a year and the Rockets are content with that, and maybe that's the best offer Tari receives, and the Rockets like, you know what, cool, we'll match it. We were cool offering you that contract last summer. You played this whole year and you didn't get more than what you thought you were worth last summer. So here you go. We'll match it and we feel good about keeping you, right? Now, the concern here is, will the Rockets get priced out of keeping Tari Eason? What is that price point, and how do the Rockets navigate moving forward if they don't view Tari Eason as a long-term part of this organization? We're going to talk about those opportunities here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Bills. Look, nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where Built comes in. Built is changing the game by turning your rent money into real rewards that you can actually use. When you pay rent through Built, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and so much more. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. Built is awesome because your rent finally works for you. You're earning points every month on something you already have to pay for. So turn your rent directly into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba. That's joinbuilt, JOINBILT.com/lockedonnba. Make sure to use that link so that they know that we sent you. Today's episode is also brought to you by Skims. Look, when I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I'll admit I was a little intrigued. I've heard great stuff about them from friends and family, so I had to give them a try. And let me tell you, they absolutely live up to the hype. Having issues with underwear sucks. You don't want to have to worry about like if you got holes in your boxers or anything like that. Whether it's fit, comfort, or just finding the right style for yourself, Skims changed all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. I tried the Skims Stretch 5-inch boxer briefs, and honestly, they're the most comfortable pair of boxers I've ever worn in my life. I made the full switch. That's all I wear these days. So check them out. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know that we sent you by. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select this show in the drop-down menu that follows so that they know that we sent you. Today's episode is also brought to you by Mint Mobile. Look, if you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. You can say yes to making the switch and getting premium wireless for just $15 a month. Mint makes it so simple. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your own phone and keep your same number and contacts. It's awesome because you get the same quality service that you had before, but for a fraction of the overall price. So if you're ready to say yes to saying no, make the switch at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, continuing the Tari Eason restricted free agency discussion here. And so, again, there's still an outcome where Tari is a long-term member of the Houston Rockets organization, where whether he balls out or not this year, and then the Rockets revisit next offseason, they say, you know what? All right, fine, Tari, we'll pay whatever. You know, if XYZ team comes along and they want to offer you $25 million a year, we're okay with paying you that. Maybe, you know, they just bite the bullet and say, we'll keep you around, right? Figure it out later. The other alternative here, and this is unfortunately what feels like is probably going to be the most likely outcome, is clearly Tari Eason believed that he was worth a certain level of contract, and the Rockets didn't agree with that. That's why they didn't strike the deal. That's why a contract wasn't inked. So now the Rockets and Rafael Stone are in the unfortunate position of having to figure out what to do with this asset. Tari Eason as an asset, not just as a player, not just as a contributing member of this team that wants to win a championship this season. They have to figure out, okay, well, there's a risk that he walks for absolutely nothing in the offseason if we think that there's a team out there that might be willing to offer him a contract that we wouldn't match, right? Speaking as the Houston Rockets. And so let's say the Rockets price point was, we'll just go with $20 million, right? They were comfortable offering up to $20 million a year to keep Tari Eason around. But maybe Tari wanted 22 or 23 or 25 a year or what have you. If the Rockets really feel like there is a team out there that is a threat to sign Tari Eason for above that $20 million a year number, then the Rockets are now in the unfortunate position of having to do their due diligence and really taking a look throughout the season and ahead of the NBA trade deadline to figure out what value they can get for dealing Tari Eason. Because there's basically two outcomes here, right? Is you don't trade Tari Eason and you get to the offseason and XYZ team comes along, or the Nets or the Pistons. I don't even know who has cap space right now. I apologize. I don't look at that stuff until we get closer to the offseason. But whatever team comes along wants to poach Tari Eason for 4 years, $100 million, right? $25 million a season. And the Rockets don't want to match that. He leaves in free agency and they get nothing for him, right? That's worst case scenario. Hell, even if you feel like Tari Eason gives you like a slight edge at winning a title this season, the delta between what you might be able to deal Tari Eason for, what you might be able to trade him for and get back and hopefully get something back that also helps push you towards the title, like it's minimal at that. Like you maybe not get like a 1-for-1 trade where you trade Tari Eason and you get a better player back, although we'll get more on that in a second here. I'm about to cook, trust me. But ultimately, like, you just don't want to let an asset walk for absolutely nothing. So Rafael Stone and the Rockets front office are going to have to canvass the trade market and see what they could ultimately get for Tari Eason potentially this season. And he is a really enticing trade chip, right? Like he's a guy that they've tried to keep out of trade discussions. He's been the guy that has been labeled, off limits, untouchable, whatever, in a lot of these different trade discussions previously that the Rockets have had, because they're bought in on him. They believe in him highly, right? And clearly he believes in himself a ton. So the alternative to losing Tari Eason for nothing, and the other pathway is, let him get to restricted free agency, and maybe it's not the end of the world, and the Rockets keep him on a relatively still, okay deal, $20 million a year, or potentially even something slightly less than that, but probably still something more than whatever was being offered this offseason. So that is still a pathway going forward, and hopefully, no hard feelings on either side. It's, Tari wanted to test the market. Rockets were like, go for it. We don't think that you're going to make that much money, but okay, whatever the situation is, right? But if the Rockets do start looking at where they could deal Tari Eason to and trying to figure out what improvements you could make to the team this season, I think there's two different routes you go. One, the Rockets have a solid amount of wing depth right now because they have KD, they have Jabari, they have Tari, and they have Dorian Finney-Smith, who's not available yet, but will be, right? That's 4 very solid wing players, 2 elite wing defenders in Tari Eason and DFS, and Jabari and KD, who are very versatile, lengthy wing defenders, different types of defenders, not quite the point of attack defenders that the other 2 guys are, but still very good in their own right. And obviously all the different offensive skills and traits amongst those 4 guys as well. If you were looking at trading Tari, you'd be worried a little bit about the wing depth, right? And potentially sustaining an injury, or, do you have enough there? The NBA is like 90% wings now, so you would want to be able to keep some of that depth. So if you were going to trade Tari, you'd want to maybe bring back in another wing, somebody that maybe their impact isn't quite as good as Tari, so maybe it's not worth exploring a trade. Or you look at doing a deal like something maybe for a guy like Derek White. And this is a name that Rockets fans are obsessed with. And I will say, on the surface, I think it's a pipe dream. I think there's a lot that would have to go right for a Derek White trade to happen. And there are a lot of pathways that it could happen. The easiest one, but also subsequently like the most difficult one, would be the Rockets potentially trading Fred Van Vliet and Tari Eason for Derek White. Because salary-wise, it gets you right around what Derek White's making, between Fred's 25 and Tari's 5.7 this year. It puts you at 30.7. And then Derek White's making like 28 some change this season. So it'd be more than enough to be able to get you over the hump. And it would actually open up a little bit of money for the Rockets being pressed up against that first apron. They'd be able to go out and sign a vet minimum guy right after making that deal, especially later in the season with like the prorated amounts and all that stuff. The issue here is Fred Van Vliet basically has a implicit no trade clause in his contract. It's not actually a no trade clause, but basically Fred could veto like a deal like that. And I don't think the Rockets would do Fred dirty like that. I mean, other teams have done way worse in pursuit of championships as far as like dealing players and like making moves for the betterment of the roster, finding that last 5%, if you will. And I think that on paper, if you were able to turn Fred, who's injured this year, obviously, and Tari into Derek White, it certainly helps the Rockets' title chances significantly this season. And I do kind of think it helps it long-term too, personally, kind of dependent on the continued growth of Amin Thompson and Sengun and Reed Shepherd and Jabari. But, I think it's potentially the right move, right? If you could convince Fred to not say no with his trade clause. From the Boston perspective, I mean, you're getting Fred back, who is potentially a step down from Derek White a little bit as far as like the production goes. But still a championship caliber point guard, still a very high level starting point guard in the league. And then you're adding Tari Eason, who immediately becomes the third best wing on the Celtics behind the duo of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I could see a world where like the Celtics could do a lot worse for a Derek White trade if they really felt like that was their best option on a season that they're kind of punting on anyways at the end of the day. Now Fred does have a player option for next year. And again, Fred would have to agree to the trade. So that's kind of a pretty big barrier to that, but there's also different versions of that trade out there that you could make happen for Derek White without giving up Fred Van Vliet, but it would incorporate, you'd have to give up so much else to make it happen. You have to piece together like Steven Adams or Dorian Finney-Smith, and then throw Tari in there, and then include one or two of the other guys, the vet minimum guys, and then you'd have to go and replace those guys and sign them, and you'd have to send different guys to third and fourth teams, and it would be a really messy in-season trade to try to facilitate. But at least while we're playing around with the NBA trade machine, on paper, Fred Van Vliet and Tari Eason for Derek White does kind of work. And there might be a world where you could conceivably, I don't know, talk Fred into it since he's hurt this year anyways. I don't know. I find it hard to imagine that Fred would feel the need to exercise that option when, if he didn't like where he got traded, he could just decline his option in the offseason and sign a fresh contract. And maybe he doesn't do that. Maybe he just takes the 1 year prove it deal next season, and he feels like Boston would be a good place to do that and pump his numbers up and then sign one more big deal. I don't know. I just don't know if the Rockets would really do that to Fred, because they really do value him immensely. He's so important to what this team has achieved over the past couple of years with Ime Udoka. He's basically an extension of the coaching staff. And it kind of feels like Fred's maybe teeing himself up to like transition into a front office role potentially, like when his career's over, like with the Rockets potentially. So this might just be a pie in the sky kind of dream scenario here. But the crux of the discussion is in place, in that the Rockets would have to start looking at trades like this one and other trades potentially for Tari Eason throughout this season, because they run the risk of losing him for nothing next offseason. So that's all I've got on the Tari stuff. I'm very curious your thoughts on the news about Tari Eason not coming to terms on a rookie scale extension with the Rockets. How do you feel about it? Are you frustrated? Are you annoyed? Are you relieved? Like, give me your thoughts about the contract situation and about Tari's future. Do you want to see him traded? Do you want to see him, do you want to see his contract matched next summer? Do you want to keep him at all costs? Give me your thoughts in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.